Okay, let's talk about that feeling. You know the one. That gut punch, the earth-shattering moment when you discover trust has been, well, fundamentally violated in your marriage.
It's
It's
devastating.
devastating on its own, right?
Yeah,
A pain that just cuts deep into the core of your security, everything you thought was stable.
absolutely.
But now, imagine that pain isn't just contained in the present moment. Imagine that's like a powerful shockwave that travels back in time, hitting all those like tender, unhealed places in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that have been hurting, maybe even bleeding since you were just a child.
Yeah.
For so many people, the infidelity they face in adulthood doesn't just break faith in a partner. It feels like a chilling, brutal confirmation of the deepest fears, those insecurities they've carried since growing up in a home where trust was shaky, maybe, or perhaps didn't exist at all.
That's such a critical distinction. It's not just a betrayal, it's the betrayal echoing past betrayals.
Exactly. Welcome, everyone, to Healthy Relationship Plug. This is the place where we, roll up our sleeves and explore the real stuff.
Yeah, the messy stuff sometimes.
The gritty, complex, sometimes painful, but ultimately, hopefully, beautiful realities of building strong, resilient, healthy connections, especially when life throws these monumental challenges your way.
Which it inevitably does.
It does. And today, we're undertaking a really necessary exploration, I think,
Hmm.
venturing into a deeply sensitive, deeply personal topic.
Very sensitive.
It's the unique, layered pain experienced when infidelity hits. For those of you who grew up in a home where trust was already fractured, already broken.
We're going to delve into why this specific kind of hurt feels so profoundly deep, right? Why it resonates far beyond just the present moment.
Yes, and then, even more importantly, we're going to meticulously unpack practical, hopeful steps. Steps that can guide you towards healing, towards wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Our focus is on helping you understand, truly understand, that your past, no matter how painful, no matter how deeply it echoes right now, it does not have to dictate your future.
That's the core message. Hope.
It doesn't have to dictate your capacity for profound healing and lasting peace.
Mm-hmm.
So stay with us, because as we venture into this, we're going to uncover some, I think, surprising insights, powerful truths, and really actionable strategies.
Yes, things you can actually do.
Things that can provide not just comfort, but a genuine pathway to navigate this incredibly difficult landscape.
You captured that initial feeling perfectly, though. The pain of infidelity is universal. It's a profound violation, no matter your background.
It really is.
It attacks the very foundation of safety and security that a healthy marriage is supposed to be built on. Everyone who goes through it has to grapple with that immediate, searing, just disorienting hurt. It's a loss.
A huge loss.
Loss of fidelity, sure, but often it feels like a loss of the shared reality, the future you thought you were building together, even just a fundamental sense of safety in your own life.
It really does cut to the absolute core. It's a betrayal of the most fundamental promise, isn't it? The one two people make when they commit to marriage.
Exactly. But as you introduce so powerfully, for some people, that cut is amplified exponentially.
Right.
When an individual comes from a background where childhood betrayal or abandonment or just a pervasive lack of trust was a significant shaping part of their early experience, well, current betrayal, like infidelity, it doesn't just add pain onto a clean slate.
No.
It feels 10 times heavier, sometimes even more. It's not solely about the partner's actions in the present. I mean, the immediate hurt is undeniable, of course, but it's what that action reopens inside them.
The old wounds.
The old, tender, unhealed places. That's what creates this layered suffering. It's complex.
Okay, let's really unpack this then. What does that kind of childhood background typically look like? What are the specific experiences that can like wire a person in this particular way,
Yeah.
making them so vulnerable to this layered pain later on?
Well, think about the environment of a child who's learning about relationships and trust. They're learning from the very people they depend on for survival, for security, their parents, their primary caregivers.
Right, their whole world.
Exactly. And when that environment isn't stable, isn't safe, the child's sense of the world and their place in it, it gets skewed really early on.
How so? What kind of things happen?
The scenarios can vary so widely. Perhaps they grew up in a home where one parent cheated on the other, maybe openly, maybe secretly, but it created this constant, like, palpable undercurrent of tension.
You feel that as a kid even if you don't understand it?
Oh, absolutely. Kids absorb everything. That tension, suspicion, insecurity. They witness the trust crumbling, maybe the loud fights, or maybe even worse, the cold, icy distance that follows. Or maybe one parent just left. physically or emotionally abandon the family. That causes such profound, often inexplicable abandonment in a child's world. Adults are supposed to be the constants.
That's supposed to be the safe base.
Exactly. And sometimes it wasn't even one big dramatic event. Sometimes it was more like a slow, steady erosion of trust. Maybe parents lived together, but like strangers.
Emotionally distant.
Yeah, emotionally distant, maybe passive-aggressive, maybe just completely checked out. And this subtly teaches the child that closeness isn't safe, or that intimacy inevitably leads to pain, or that relationships are just inherently fragile, unstable, ultimately untrustworthy.
Wow. So it's like they're learning a really harsh lesson about love very early on.
They are. In these kinds of environments, a child's heart and mind don't develop expecting secure attachment or reliable love. They learn, often as a survival mechanism, to just brace themselves.
To expect the worst.
To expect trust will eventually be shattered, because that's what they saw or what they experienced with the most important people in their young lives. It becomes their blueprint for relationships.
So it's like their internal security system, their fundamental understanding of safety in relationships, was built based on expecting the worst case scenario because that's what was modeled or experienced.
Precisely. These repeated or significant childhood experiences create a really deeply ingrained expectation. The heart, even the nervous system, gets kind of wired to anticipate rejection and betrayal.
Wired for it.
Yeah, it's a form of self-protection, really, developed when they were most vulnerable. The child unconsciously reasons, if I expect it, if I'm prepared for the abandonment or the lie, maybe it won't hurt quite as much when it inevitably happens. Or maybe I can see it coming and protect myself before it completely breaks me.
That makes so much sense from a survival perspective.
It does. So then, fast forward. When infidelity happens in their adult relationship, especially in a marriage where the stakes for security and the future feel so incredibly high,
Yeah.
it doesn't just feel like a painful new betrayal. It feels on a deep, almost cellular level like a devastating, undeniable confirmation.
Oh, wow. Confirmation.
Confirmation of those deepest, oldest fears. It validates that internal narrative that got written way back in childhood, the one that whispers or maybe screams, "See, I knew this would happen. I knew I couldn't trust."
Yes. And those narratives, they are incredibly powerful, aren't they?
So powerful.
And just heartbreakingly painful because they feel so utterly true in that moment of crisis. What are the specific thoughts, those old big tapes you mentioned, that tend to resurface with such intensity when infidelity triggers these old wounds?
It's like the voices of the past suddenly get incredibly loud, just drowning out the present reality with these echoes of old pain. Thoughts that were maybe dormant or you thought you'd dealt with, they suddenly surge back with the force of a tsunami.
Like what? What kind of thoughts?
For instance, the thought, "See, I knew love doesn't last." This just confirms the instability they witnessed, maybe in their parents' relationship, with the fleeting nature of security they felt as a child.
That feels very fatalistic.
It does. Or maybe even more painful, "I knew I wasn't enough." This one is particularly cruel and sadly very common. The infidelity, which is fundamentally about the partner's choices and their brokenness.
Right, their issue.
Yes. It gets misinterpreted through the lens of childhood inadequacy. The original feeling of not enough might have come from complex family dynamics, emotional neglect, maybe inconsistent affection. But the betrayal in adulthood feels like concrete proof, like a final verdict on their inherent worth.
Oh, that's devastating.
It is, and perhaps the most haunting one for someone from a broken home is the thought, "I knew I'd end up like my parents."
Oh, gosh.
That terrifying fear of repeating the painful history they tried so hard to escape, of inevitably recreating the dysfunction they witnessed, that becomes overwhelming in the face of their own marital betrayal.
That must feel like a trap closing in.
It really can, and it is absolutely crucial for you, the listener, to understand that this is the old wound. The childhood trauma and its resulting narratives are bleeding directly and powerfully into the present pain of the infidelity.
The current situation is like the trigger.
Exactly. It unlocks decades of stored pain, fear, and those core beliefs.
So someone in this situation isn't just dealing with the immediate immense pain and chaos of the current infidelity, which is bad enough.
Bad enough on its own, absolutely.
They're simultaneously being flooded with unprocessed grief, deep-seated fears, and core beliefs about themselves and relationships that were formed decades ago in childhood. It's like a double crisis hitting all at once.
Precisely. You are grappling with the raw, immediate, searing pain of the infidelity alongside the unhealed pain the trauma responses, and the fear from your childhood. It is indeed a double burden, and it makes the healing process significantly more complex, no question.
So much more complex.
Old wounds, those emotional fractures that maybe never quite mended properly, they reopen with startling intensity. Insecurities about self-worth, lovability, safety, things you might have thought you'd managed or even overcome, they come rushing back to the surface with a vengeance.
It must feel like going backwards.
It can feel like that. And, very understandably, deep protective walls often go up immediately. Building emotional barriers, withdrawing, shutting down, it feels like the necessary thing to do because the threat feels so incredibly familiar and overwhelmingly powerful.
Like the original danger is back.
Exactly. It feels like the original inescapable danger from childhood is back, right here in your marriage.
I can absolutely imagine that this layered pain leads to some predictable, though perhaps ultimately counterproductive, reactions in the adult relationship, all rooted in that deep, primal fear of being abandoned again.
It absolutely does. These reactions are often survival strategies that worked or seem to work in the unsafe environment of childhood, but they can seriously hinder healing in the adult context.
What kind of reactions are common?
Well, one very common reaction is shutting down emotionally. The pain, both the current and the historical pain, it's just too much to process simultaneously. So the heart and mind try to go numb just to survive the onslaught. It's a form of dissociation, really.
Just checking out.
Checking out. Another is actually the opposite, overcompensating, trying desperately to control the environment, control the partner's behavior.
How does that look?
This person might try to be perfect, the perfect spouse, the perfect homemaker, the perfect listener, believing unconsciously that if they're just good enough, lovable enough, attentive enough, they can somehow prevent the other shoe from dropping.
Like they can earn the loyalty.
Exactly. They try to make themselves indispensable and therefore secure. They might constantly try to earn loyalty, feeling like it's not something freely given, but something that has to be purchased or merited through their own relentless effort or compliance.
That sounds exhausting and probably breeds resentment.
It's utterly exhausting. And yes, it often leads to deep resentment down the line. They might also become terrified of rocking the boat.
Avoiding conflict.
Avoiding conflict at all costs. Avoiding difficult conversations, not expressing their own needs, even when it's absolutely necessary for the health of the relationship. Because the deepest, most terrifying fear is that any disturbance, any ripple, could trigger the abandonment or rejection they experienced or witnessed before.
So the underlying motivation for all these reactions, the shutting down, the overfunctioning, the fear of conflict, is this deep, primal, often unconscious fear of being abandoned, just like it happened when they were small and completely vulnerable.
That is precisely the core of it. It's the echo of that original wound, that foundational insecurity about whether they are safe, whether they are lovable enough to keep people from leaving. That's what's driving their behavior in the present crisis.
It's a protective strategy from the past.
It is. It was developed in an unsafe past environment. And while it's completely understandable given their history, it can actually make healthy processing, clear communication, and genuine healing in the current situation incredibly difficult.
Because those strategies don't work well in an adult relationship needing repair.
Right. They often push people away or prevent real intimacy. So it's vital to recognize that this layered pain where the immediate betrayal is sitting directly on top of an already tender, unhealed place in the heart that's been vulnerable for decades. This is not an exaggeration. It's an incredibly complex and difficult reality.
Yeah.
It adds significant layers of challenge and complexity to the already arduous journey of healing from infidelity. And validating that added difficulty, just acknowledging it, is a crucial first step in addressing it.
Wow. Acknowledging and validating that added difficulty feels incredibly important. It gives language to something that so many people are feeling, but maybe didn't understand that this pain isn't just about the affair, it's stirring up these old ghosts.
Exactly.
But hearing all this,
Yeah.
talk about deep wiring, old wounds bleeding into the present, it could understandably sound like a really bleak picture. Like if you come from that background, you're almost predestined for this kind of pain, like you're doomed when infidelity hits.
And that is the most critical point to counter, to refute with everything we have learned. While the pain is undeniably real, it's multi-layered, and the challenge it presents is significant. Your past absolutely does not have to dictate your healing or your future capacity for healthy relationships.
Okay, that's the hope right there.
That is the hope. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to hurt as profoundly and as deeply as this complex experience warrants. There's absolutely no shame in that depth of pain.
None at all.
But, and this is a powerful truth to really hold on to. You are also allowed to choose differently. You possess agency. You possess resilience. You possess the capacity for healing, even in the face of profound pain and a difficult history.
So the past makes it harder, but not impossible.
Your difficult past might make the path to healing more complex, absolutely. It might require more intentionality, more support, but it does not erect an insurmountable barrier to wholeness. You are not doomed, period.
Okay, that offers a real breath of fresh air, a real glimmer of hope in what feels like such an overwhelming situation. Because if the past doesn't dictate the future, if you're not doomed, where do you even begin?
Yeah, where do you start?
What are the concrete, actionable steps someone can actually take to navigate this incredibly turbulent storm, especially when it's stirring up so much old stuff alongside the current devastation?
Healing is not only possible, it is absolutely achievable. But it requires courage. It requires intentionality and a willingness to engage with both the present pain and the echoes from the past.
It's work.
It is work, but there are indeed specific, powerful principles and steps that can guide this process, helping you move from being defined by the hurt to actively building a path towards wholeness.
Okay, let's dive into those foundational pillars of healing. What's the very first crucial step in starting to untangle this complex knot of pain?
The first key pillar, and it's foundational precisely because the two layers of pain feel so merged, so tangled, is to separate your present pain from your past trauma.
Separate present pain from past trauma.
This sounds almost deceptively simple when you say it, right?
Sounds easy enough on paper.
But it is incredibly challenging in practice, especially in the heat of the crisis, because they feel so deeply intertwined.
Why is making that separation so absolutely crucial for healing? Why can't you just deal with it all together?
Because when the past trauma is active, when those old fears and narratives are screaming in your ear, they distort your perception of the present reality. They put a filter over everything.
Oh, okay.
You risk misinterpreting the current infidelity solely through the lens of that childhood fear and betrayal. If you don't consciously work to separate these threads, you might see your partner's wrong choice, not just as their failure or their brokenness,
Which it is.
but you see it as absolute definitive proof that your story is inevitably doomed to repeat your parents, that all relationships end in betrayal, that you are inherently incapable of having a stable, trusting connection.
So it confirms those worst fears again.
Exactly. You might even react to your partner as if they are the parent who hurt or abandoned you years ago, layering all that old pain onto the present interaction. And that prevents clear communication, prevents a realistic assessment of the current situation.
So you're not really seeing them clearly.
You're seeing them through the fog of the past. And not every act of betrayal, as intensely painful as it is, automatically means your adult life story is fated to end up exactly like the broken homes of your childhood. You need to see the current reality clearly, not just through that distorting filter of old wounds.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do you actually do this separation when everything feels like a tangled mess inside? How do you begin to differentiate what's present hurt and what's past trauma surging back?
This is where external support becomes not just helpful, but often absolutely invaluable.
Getting help.
Getting help specifically for this task. This very often means talking to a qualified therapist, a counselor, or maybe even a wise, trusted mentor who really understands complex emotional landscapes, particularly those involving trauma and relational betrayal.
Why is that outside perspective so important here?
Their external perspective is vital because when you are drowning in that combined emotion, it is almost impossible to gain enough distance to see clearly on your own. You're just too close to it, too overwhelmed by it.
Right.
A skilled professional or a wise guide can help you kind of stand back metaphorically, identify the different emotional screams, and begin the deliberate work of untangling the threads. Separating the present hurt from the deeply embedded pain, fear, and those faulty beliefs from your past.
They help you sort it out.
They help you sort it out. They can help you recognize when a reaction you're having now is being disproportionately amplified by an old trigger from way back then. And this untangling, it's not a quick fix. Let's be clear.
No magic wand.
No magic wand. It's a process. It requires courage. It requires time. And often it requires guided work with someone who can help you process the childhood experiences independently of the adult crisis. You need space for both.
That makes complete sense. Trying to gain that kind of objective perspective or do that complex emotional work alone when you're in such a raw, vulnerable crisis state, yeah, that would be incredibly difficult. Maybe impossible for most people.
Very, very difficult.
Okay, so separating the pain is the first pillar, foundational. What's the second foundational principle for navigating this storm?
The second pillar offers a crucial warning. It's a piece of wisdom gleaned from seeing the destructive consequences of acting impulsively when you're in crisis mode. It is, don't make a permanent decision in a temporary storm.
Ah, the emotional chaos we talked about earlier. This seems directly related to that.
Exactly. The period immediately following the discovery of infidelity, especially when it's layered with that reactivated pain of old wounds. It's not just a storm, it's like a Category 5 hurricane of emotional intensity.
Total chaos inside.
Total chaos. It is confusing, agonizing, filled with overwhelming feelings, panic, rage, despair, fear, confusion, deep sadness. Sometimes even weird moments of false calm, then boom, renewed intensity.
Yeah, the roller coaster.
Absolutely. And in that state, your emotional regulation is often compromised. Your ability to think clearly, rationally is significantly impaired. The urge to do something, anything, to regain a sense of control, to make the pain stop, or just escape the unbearable uncertainty is incredibly powerful.
You just want it to end.
You just want it to end.
And the significant risk here is making a life-altering, potentially irreversible decision. Like definitively deciding, I'm staying no matter what, or I'm leaving, this is over. While you're in the absolute height of this highly charged, dysregulated emotional state.
Precisely. Making decisions of that magnitude, decisions that will shape your future, potentially the future of your family, while you're in the throes of this intense, crisis-driven emotional state is perilous. It's dangerous.
Why perilous?
Because these kinds of decisions are often driven by the most immediate, intense, and reactive emotions, which, for someone with a history of childhood trauma, are very likely to be deeply influenced by that panic, that primal fear of abandonment.
Or the urge to run.
Or the protective, but often limiting, urge to flee before you get hurt even worse. These decisions are reactions to the storm. They're not thoughtful responses born from a place of clarity or potential healing.
So the core advice here is patience, to wait, to consciously allow the intensity of the emotions to settle down a bit before attempting to make those huge life-altering choices.
Absolutely. The wisdom is to advise yourself or the person you might be supporting through this to consciously create space. Allow the immediate crisis-level emotions the time and space they need to settle first.
Doesn't mean ignore them.
No, definitely not. It doesn't mean you stuff or ignore your feelings. You acknowledge their intensity. You feel them safely, ideally with support, like we just discussed. But you recognize that they are not, in that peak moment, the sole or the best basis for a rational, long-term, life-altering decision. It's about consciously contrasting, reacting purely out of that deep primal childhood fear, that gut reaction, which is often protective but ultimately limiting, with eventually being able to respond from a place of potential healing, clearer thinking, and a more integrated understanding of both the present reality and the influence of the past.
Responding, not just reacting.
Responding, not just reacting. And that process takes significant time. It takes immense patience with yourself and conscious intentionality to resist that powerful urge to act impulsively. You need to get out of the immediate triggered fight, flight, or freeze, the state being driven by the old, unprocessed fear before you can really see the path forward clearly.
That distinction is incredibly powerful, differentiating reacting from a place of fear versus responding from a place of potential healing and clarity.
Right.
It highlights that you actually have a choice in how you navigate this, not just what the outcome will be.
You absolutely have a choice in the how.
Okay, so pillar 1, separate pain from trauma. Pillar 2, don't rush decisions in the storm. What's the third essential pillar for healing?
The third pillar is absolutely critical, and perhaps even more so, for anyone whose sense of self-worth or fundamental identity was damaged or questioned during childhood. It is. Refuse to own what isn't yours.
This speaks directly to that heartbreaking tendency for the injured party in infidelity to somehow blame themselves, doesn't it? Even when it makes no logical sense.
It does. And it is particularly insidious and powerful when past experiences have already instilled a deep-seated question in your heart about your own value, lovability, or your adequacy. It makes you vulnerable to taking on blame that isn't yours.
Right.
So it's vital, absolutely vital, to draw a firm line here. Someone else's choice to cheat is not in any way, shape, or form a reflection of your worth, your value, or your adequacy as a person or a spouse.
Say that again, that's important.
Someone else's cheating is not a reflection of your worth or your adequacy. It is not proof that you weren't good enough, attractive enough, desirable enough, or somehow failed to prevent their actions through your own shortcomings. That's a lie.
Where then does the responsibility for the infidelity actually lie? Let's be crystal clear.
Clearly, firmly, and solely. It is a reflection of their choice. their character flaw, their brokenness, or their weakness,
Her decision.
their decision. Now, sure, there might be existing relational issues, maybe distance, maybe conflict within the marriage, as there are in pretty much any human relationship to some degree, right? No marriage is perfect.
Of course.
But the decision to step outside the covenant of marriage through infidelity is a choice made solely by the person who committed the act. The responsibility lies with them.
So the injured party should not carry the shame or the guilt.
Should not. Must not. The injured party should not carry shame, guilt, or blame for their partner's infidelity. This is not an objective burden that belongs to them. It is an emotional weight that is often unfairly picked up, especially with that history we talked about, but which objectively does not belong to the one who was betrayed.
And that's why the pillar is phrased as refuse to own. It's active.
It's an active refusal. Yes. It's the conscious process of recognizing that misplaced blame or shame when it pops up. And it will pop up, naming it as something that does not belong to you, and then deliberately, maybe many, many times over, shedding that burden, letting it go.
Like setting it down.
Exactly. Setting it down because it's not yours to carry. It's a declaration of your inherent worth, which exists completely independent of another person's choices or failures.
Refuse to own what isn't yours. That is an incredibly powerful and necessary mantra to internalize, especially when everything inside might be screaming that you must have been the cause, or at least partly responsible.
It takes practice, but it's crucial.
Okay. What's the fourth pillar for healing and moving forward?
The fourth pillar directly addresses a deeply ingrained fear that is especially common for those from broken homes. It is to choose healing over repeating cycles.
The fear we talked about earlier, the fear of becoming like their parents, or of recreating the same painful, dysfunctional family dynamic they witnessed or grew up in.
Exactly that fear. For many survivors of difficult childhoods, the deepest, most terrifying fear isn't just the pain of the current moment, but that chilling possibility that they are somehow destined, fated, to repeat the very patterns of betrayal, abandonment, or dysfunction they witnessed and perhaps suffered from growing up.
The fear takes root.
It takes root. Thoughts like, am I going to become my mother or my father in how I handle relationships, conflict, or pain? Or is my marriage inevitably going to end up just as broken, just as distant, or just as unstable as the home I came from, despite everything I've tried to do differently?
That truly feels like an incredibly heavy weight to carry on top of the immediate crisis of infidelity.
It is. It adds another layer of sort of existential dread to the immediate pain. But there's a powerful, liberating affirmation offered in the face of this fear. You're not your father, you're not your mother.
Simple but profound.
It's a declaration of your distinct identity, your own agency, your innate capacity to make different choices than those who came before you. Your identity is not reducible to your parents' failures or the dynamics of your childhood home. You are your own person.
So this pillar is about actively choosing a different path, consciously steering your life and your relationships in a direction different from the one you might have been shown or feared you were fated to follow.
Precisely. It involves actively making choices that are fundamentally different from what you witnessed or experienced in your childhood home.
What kind of choices are we talking about?
Well, it might mean being willing to be vulnerable and authentically communicate your feelings and needs, even when it's really uncomfortable. That's often a stark contrast to the emotional guardedness or the conflict avoidance learned in dysfunctional homes.
Right, breaking that pattern.
Breaking that pattern. It means being willing to ask for help when you need it, connecting back to Pillar 1, getting support which might have felt impossible or unsafe in your childhood. It certainly involves establishing and maintaining clear, healthy boundaries in your relationships. That's a skill often completely absent or severely distorted in unhealthy family dynamics.
Boundaries are huge.
Huge. The ultimate goal of this pillar is to consciously and deliberately create a new legacy for yourself, one built on trust, honesty, health, rather than unconsciously repeating the patterns of pain.
So it's bigger than just this marriage.
It's bigger than just the potential outcome of the current marriage. It's about charting a new, healthier trajectory for your life itself, actively breaking the cycle of pain and dysfunction you experienced growing up. It's a courageous act of self-determination. You get to choose.
Breaking cycles is such a vital and empowering part of personal growth and healing, but yeah, it definitely takes conscious effort. Okay, we've talked about separating present pain from past trauma, not rushing decisions in the storm, refusing to own misplaced blame, and actively choosing to break negative cycles. What's the fifth and final pillar presented? The one that seems especially resonant for those with deep old wounds, particularly for our audience.
The fifth pillar is indeed deeply resonant, particularly within a Christian framework, and it speaks directly to that root feeling many experience when betrayal hits old wounds. That feeling of being emotionally orphaned, fundamentally alone with their deepest hurts. This pillar is to let God father your heart.
Let God father your heart. That phrase feels incredibly tender
Yeah.
and powerful. It speaks to a profound need, doesn't it?
It really does. Sometimes, especially when the current betrayal triggers those raw, unhealed childhood wounds related to parental figures or safety, the deepest pain can feel like being utterly abandoned, emotionally orphaned.
Like no one's got your back.
Exactly, like you are fundamentally alone with your hurt, unseen, misunderstood, unprotected in the face of this overwhelming pain. And this feeling can be profoundly amplified by childhood experiences where emotional safety, consistent care, or reliable presence from parents was lacking or unpredictable. It can feel like the world is fundamentally unsafe and you are completely alone within it.
So this pillar directly addresses that core feeling of being alone, unprotected, or orphaned in your deepest pain.
Yes, it offers both a fundamental truth and a profound invitation. The truth is, you are not orphaned in your pain. You are seen, you are known, and you are deeply unconditionally cared for by a perfect, trustworthy Heavenly Father.
That's a foundational Christian belief.
It is. And the invitation is to lean into that truth, to allow Him to fill that role. God knows intimately the terrain of human brokenness. He understands the depth of betrayal, both past and present. He knows how to walk with you through this valley of complex pain, no matter how dark it gets, how long it feels, or how confusing the path seems.
He doesn't just watch from afar.
No, He walks with you in it. And critically, He knows how to bind up the places that have been bleeding since childhood. The phrase is so evocative.
It really is binding up those old wounds.
It speaks not just to addressing the current wound of the infidelity, but to a deep historical healing process. A healing that God is uniquely capable of initiating and sustaining healing those very foundational insecurities and hurts planted so long ago.
And what specifically does allowing God to father your heart help rebuild in this process of layered healing? What does He address at the core?
Well, when you allow God to step into this role, He helps rebuild not just trust in a general sense, like trust in others again, or trust in the potential outcome of the situation, which are certainly part of the journey, but fundamentally, He helps rebuild your identity.
Your core sense of self.
Your core sense of self. This is absolutely crucial because both the past trauma and the present betrayal have likely attacked your sense of self-worth. They leave you feeling inadequate, unlovable, fundamentally flawed, or maybe like you are too much or not enough.
Those old messages again.
Those old destructive messages. Allowing God to father your heart means allowing Him to speak truth into those places. To redefine who you are, not based on human failure, yours or others, not based on your past experiences, but based on His unwavering love and His truth about your inherent value and belovedness as His child.
So your identity gets grounded somewhere else entirely.
Exactly. Your identity becomes grounded in His constant, trustworthy character, which is independent of anyone else's actions, anyone's failures, anyone's capacity to betray you. This provides a powerful, stable counter-narrative to the messages of inadequacy and worthlessness that might have been planted so long ago and brutally re-triggered by the infidelity.
That's a profound shift in perspective. It takes the foundation from shaky human ground and puts it on solid rock.
Beautifully put, yes.
So these 5 pillars, separating present pain from past trauma with support, consciously not making permanent decisions in the temporary storm, deliberately refusing to own blame that isn't yours, actively choosing healing and breaking generational cycles, and finally allowing God to father your heart and rebuild your identity, they really offer a comprehensive framework, don't they? Like a roadmap for navigating this incredibly complex pain.
They are active choices, yes. They require courage, persistence, consistent effort. But they are also powerful sources of strength, wisdom, and genuine hope. They provide a tangible framework for moving through an incredibly complex and painful experience with intention, with resilience, and with the real potential for deep, lasting wholeness.
Thinking about all of this, the layered pain, the history it drags up, the sheer difficulty of untangling it all, it can still feel overwhelming, like the mountain is simply too high to climb sometimes.
Is there truly, genuinely hope for wholeness after experiencing infidelity that echoes so much past pain? Is healing really possible? Absolutely, yes. And this brings us to a place of really embracing that profound hope and understanding that this process, this journey, it truly is a fight worth undertaking.
A fight worth fighting.
Definitely. While infidelity, particularly when it triggers those deep old childhood wounds, feels like it could utterly shatter you, the core message that emerges is powerful and clear. You are explicitly told you are not broken beyond repair.
Not broken beyond repair. Hearing that and really believing it deep down must be incredibly difficult, but so vital.
It is difficult because the feeling of brokenness can be so pervasive, so overwhelming, but it is a truth to hold on to, maybe even cling to sometimes. And linked directly to that is the liberation from the past we touched on earlier.
That you're not doomed to repeat it.
You are not doomed to repeat what you saw or experienced growing up. The painful patterns of your childhood do not have an unbreakable hold on your adult life or your future relationships. You do not have to live your entire life constantly bracing yourself, constantly expecting the worst possible outcome in every relationship you have. That's not your destiny.
So my story can truly be different from the one I witnessed growing up, even if it feels like history is repeating right now.
Your story can absolutely be different. Your healing can be real, deep, and profound. This isn't just wishful thinking or positive affirmations, though those have their place. It's based on the reality of human resilience, the transformative power of applying these principles we've discussed, and the capacity for healing that exists when you intentionally engage with the process.
Okay. And this potential for healing, this journey towards wholeness, is it dependent on the relationship surviving the infidelity? Does it mean things will be okay only if the marriage works out in the end? Because that puts a lot of pressure on the outcome.
That's another incredibly powerful truth that emerges, and it offers immense freedom. Your heart can be whole again, and significantly, this is possible with or without the person who caused the current hurt.
Really, wholeness is possible regardless.
Yes. Healing from the complex, layered pain of infidelity is, at its core, an internal journey. It's about your personal restoration. While reconciliation might be a desired outcome for some, and that's a separate, complex path requiring both partners, your personal wholeness, your capacity for future health and happiness are not solely dependent on your partner's actions moving forward or the ultimate fate of the relationship.
Yeah.
It is something you can pursue and achieve for yourself, regardless of external circumstances. This puts the power of your healing journey back into your own hands where it belongs.
That truth is incredibly freeing. It removes the immense weight of your own healing being entirely contingent on someone else's choices, someone else's actions, someone who may have deeply hurt you.
Exactly. Your healing belongs to you.
As someone is walking this difficult path, maybe feeling overwhelmed right now, what are some final, encouraging, practical pieces of advice to keep in mind? Things to hold on to day by day.
Yeah, absolutely. As we wrap up this exploration, there are some truly encouraging, actionable pieces of guidance to carry forward. First, and maybe most importantly, give yourself abundant permission to take your time.
Be patient with yourself.
Incredibly patient. Healing from something this complex, this layered with history is absolutely not a race. There is no timeline, no deadline for your grief, your processing, or your recovery. Be patient and compassionate with yourself through all the ups and downs, the good days, and the really hard days.
Okay, what else?
Second, allow yourself to feel your feelings, all of them, without judgment, without trying to edit them or wish them away.
Even the ugly ones.
Especially the ugly ones. The anger, the profound sadness, the crushing fear, the confusion, the deep grief, the moments of despair, even the fleeting moments of hope. Feel them. Process them safely again, ideally with support. Trying to stuff, suppress, or just intellectualize these powerful emotions only prolongs and complicates the healing process. Give them space to move through you. They won't last forever if you let them flow.
Okay, feel the feelings. And finally,
frame this healing journey not as a passive process you just endure, hoping it gets better someday. Frame it as a deliberate, active choice. Even frame it as a fight.
a fight.
Yes. You are fighting not just for recovery from the affair itself, but you are fighting for healing from the entire history of pain, fear, and faulty beliefs that it triggered within you. It requires immense courage. It requires persistence. It requires a decision, maybe made fresh each day, sometimes each hour, to step towards healing even when it's hard.
Fighting for your healing. That resonates deeply. It's an active, empowered posture to take in the face of something that feels so disempowering, so victimizing.
It is. It's not passive victimhood. It requires conscious engagement and a refusal to be defined solely by the pain, past or present.
As we bring this challenging but ultimately hopeful conversation to a close, I'm thinking about that fifth pillar, letting God father your heart. And this powerful idea of actively fighting for your healing, for writing a new story that isn't just a repeat of the past.
Hmm.
It makes you consider, how does truly embracing God as the ultimate trustworthy source of your identity, your belonging, your security, how does that fundamentally change the way you understand and experience betrayal? Not just the current painful act, but those old wounds too.
Yeah, how does it reframe it?
How does seeing it not as a definitive mark against you, not as irrefutable proof that you are fundamentally flawed or unlovable, but rather as a painful, messy, but ultimately conquerable part of a much larger story? A story of redemption, resilience, and personal strength that you are actively writing with him.
Like a powerful question.
And then on a practical level, how does grounding your identity in his unwavering love and truth about who you are, rather than grounding it in human approval or relationship outcomes, how does that empower you to finally set those healthy boundaries you learned were missing in childhood? To make those difficult choices about your relationships and your future choices that previously felt utterly impossible because that deep old fear of abandonment was just too overwhelming to face.
That perspective truly does shift everything, doesn't it? It moves the focus from being trapped and defined by the wound itself to being empowered by the healer and the unwavering strength he provides. It opens up possibilities for wholeness and freedom you might not have believed were available to you before.
This has been such a necessary and powerful exploration today, venturing into a deep and often hidden layer of pain that infidelity can bring, particularly for those who carry the weight of past relational wounds.
We've acknowledged the unique difficulty of this layered pain. We've identified some of the patterns of how the past echoes in the current crisis. And importantly, we've laid out 5 powerful, actionable pillars that offer a clear way forward, a path towards healing and hope.
Yeah.
And it is so important to reiterate that central message one more time. Wholeness is absolutely possible for you.
And if you are walking this path right now, if any part of this conversation resonated deeply with your experience, please know this. You are not alone. You're not alone in the complexity of your pain, and you're certainly not alone in the potential for your healing. The principles and insights we've discussed offer a real, tangible way forward, grounded in truth and hope.
This has been an important conversation. Really vital.
It has, and we really encourage you, our listener, to perhaps revisit this conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe listen again when you feel a bit stronger, or perhaps gently share it with someone you know who might need to hear this message. Someone who might be struggling and needs to understand their pain might be more complex than they realize.
Yeah, sharing can be powerful.
And more than just listening again, we invite you to actively engage with these principles this week. Don't just let it be information. Maybe pick just one of the 5 pillars that resonated most strongly with you today. What would it look like to focus on that one this week?
Make it practical.
Make it practical. Maybe journaling about what that pillar means for you personally. Or actively taking the step to seek out that support system we discussed. Making the call, sending the email, or perhaps spending some intentional quiet time simply sitting and allowing God to speak his truth and his healing into those old bleeding places in your heart.
Just creating space for him.
Creating space.
Mm-hmm.
Frame engaging with healthy relationship plug, not just as tuning into another conversation, but as actively continuing your personal journey. Your journey of building healthier relationships first and foremost, a healthier relationship with yourself, grounded in truth and grace, and then healthier relationships with others, empowered by wisdom and hope.
It starts with you.
It starts with you. Make sure you're subscribed or following us so you don't miss future conversations where we tackle navigating relationship challenges with wisdom, with resilience, and always with profound hope.
Your healing journey is important. Remember that. And you are absolutely worth the effort it takes.
Fight for it. Choose hope. Be empowered. We'll be here exploring these necessary truths together.